Due to the potential for adult content and conversation in this program, viewer discretion is advised.
This thing on? It's about time we got this damn show off the ground. I think it's time we kick the intro.
What up, kid? It's the time once again to spend another hour conversating. Let's begin. Speak our minds, we ain't PC, we might offend. We say what others won't, throw caution to the wind. Touching topics range from politics to the arts, latest on sports, and number one on the music charts, all covered here. So grab yourself a beer and get yourself comfortable and lend a shit ear. You see, every show different, but every show be on point. We have legit variety, so we never disappoint. Sometimes special guests, sometimes have contests, sometimes social issues, yet it will be addressed. Time to buckle up, get ready for the wild ride. Hosted by your man, Double D, 801 Wasadio Rhymes, the only flavor that we ever will know. Hey, it's the Lunchbox Show.
Welcome to the show. This is the Lunchbox, and I am your host with the most dangerous devil, hip hop boss, coming out of Salt Lake City, Utah. We have a very controversial topic today. I think it's an interesting topic. It's something that is a current social issue in our country, and there's clearly very divisive aspects of today's topic on both sides of the issue. There are probably valid points on both sides of the issue, and it is something personally that got me a little heated the other night as I was able to get into a conversation with one of the Salt Lake Tribune writers online. So it's an important topic, and it's one that we're going to watch it develop and play out as we go. It's still developing right now with the Utah Jazz. And so I think today this will be a very honest, a very factual based, and a very necessary and candid conversation on the topic of the Utah Jazz scholarships and the scholarships being available only to people of color. So you're not going to want to miss this show today, and I think we will have some interesting perspectives and points to share today as well. Man, I just got myself a reverse osmosis system in my house for drinking water, and I can tell you that makes the water so freaking good. I mean, I'm just like drinking gallons and gallons of water, it seems like, every day. But anyway, if you don't have a reverse osmosis system in your house, shameless plug for them today, get yourself one, especially if you live in places like I do in Magna where the water sucks. So anyway, let's get into today's topic. And the topic of the day is discussing the current situation that seems to have been exposed, more or less, or developed a couple of days ago within the Utah Jazz organization. What I'm referring to is an interview that took place a couple of days ago, and the question was brought up to Utah Governor Spencer Cox. How does he feel about the Utah Jazz scholarship program for kids and only people of color being able to apply for this program or qualify for this program? His answer was actually kind of interesting, as he said that he didn't believe that the program was racist. He also mentioned the fact that the Utah Jazz are privately owned by Ryan Smith, is the new owner, pretty much everybody knows by now. And therefore, he was able to give those scholarships away in whatever way he sees fit. So somebody in the media decided to pick up on this, pick up on the fact that the scholarships are only available, or I should say available, to people of color, which includes, according to their descriptions on NBA.com, includes a description which basically includes just about everybody besides white people, okay? It specifically mentions Asians, Hispanics, Latinos, Polynesians, black folks. So it's a pretty all-encompassing program for these kids, right? With the exception of white kids, which are disqualified based on the color of their skin. So somebody in the media picked up on this. He asked the governor, and all of a sudden, this thing seems to have started rolling. Now, I'm aware of a couple other stories and places where this has been picked up too, and we will actually listen in today on one of the conversations from the KUTV podcast. We will listen to what they had to say about it, and specifically former lawmaker and House Speaker Greg Hughes. We'll listen to what he had to say. And at the end of it all, I'm going to give my personal take on the situation here. Now, anytime I'm discussing situations like this, I like to lay out all of the undisputed facts in the beginning, meaning facts that pretty much everybody, regardless how you look at the issue, can agree on. So you can completely get those out of the way and move forward on the conversation. So with that in mind, let's talk about the program. Let's give a little description. Let's give some of the facts surrounding this program. And that way we get all of those things out of the way, and then we can discuss the more controversial parts of the scholarship program. First, this scholarship program, according to my research, and this, I believe these particular facts I'm going to read off to you come from NBA.com, specifically the Utah Jazz page. I will try to link everything that I refer to in the description so you can look these up yourself and verify for yourself. But this scholarship program in particular is new this season to the Utah Jazz, okay? As far as I can tell, the way they're going about the program. Now they've done other programs in the past, I believe, that have been scholarship programs. Have been they've had things for homeless people. They've had they've had a bunch of different programs when the ownership was under the Millers, okay? And so as far as I can tell and verify, the program that is in controversial aspect here is actually new to this particular season of the Jazz, okay? Now, this program seems to have been created and the concept come up with by Ryan Smith, who we all know is the majority owner of the Utah Jazz now. He purchased the Utah Jazz within the last couple of years, the majority stake from the Millers, and it appears from everything that I can find related to the articles, this is a program him and his wife seem to have put together, okay? Now, the scholarship program, it includes tuition, books, fees, and room and board, according to NBA.com, for a full undergraduate education, okay? So that gives you the synopsis of the scholarships when they're awarded to these kids. It's pretty all-encompassing. I mean, this is a pretty nice thing to give to children. This is going to help out a lot of kids and students who are underserved. Now, The additional facts added to this is that the Utah Jazz are going to give away one of these scholarships for every win this season. So by the time we get to the end of the season, being we have the Utah Jazz, have the number one record in the league, so we're doing quite well this year. We could be approaching 50 individual scholarships, okay, by the end of the season for these kids. So that gives you some basic, undisputed facts of this program as far as what I understand it to be and what seems to be available out there for information to verify this. Okay. Another additional fact to add to this is the fact that the Utah Jazz are a privately owned business. Okay. With that in mind, I'm going to say that I do not support the government forcing private businesses to have to give to certain demographics. So meaning my position is I do not support the government coming in and taking action and forcing a private business to give scholarships to white kids. I think once we continue to open that Pandora's box, you open up a whole world of new problems in privately owned businesses. Okay? So I do not support the government encroaching on their programs and the way they see fit to run them as a private business. As well as that position, it is perfectly legal from what I can find for case law and for the history of private enterprise, it's perfectly legal to have a program like this and to basically distribute it out any way you see fit. Okay? So that means we don't want the government encroaching on this program, as right now they don't. They don't make any decisions related to that. And it's a privately owned business, therefore they can distribute their funds how they see fit, just like a private citizen can. Okay? So that gives you really some undisputed, truthful facts and basis moving forward to understand what is going on here. One of the other things I'd like to point out, the fact that the Utah Jazz, the lines are a little more blurred when you say this is a private enterprise, privately owned business. Yes, on one hand, that is for the most part accurate. However, one thing that they failed to mention in this situation is that they get all kinds of tax breaks and lots of leeway, okay? They get lots of benefits and perks that are kicked back to them at the taxpayer's expense. So, while the organization may be privately owned and may be part of the NBA, which is a private enterprise in itself, a good example is the fact that a few years ago, going back to 2016, the Utah Jazz organization received a $125 million break on their taxes for the renovation of Vivint Arena. Okay, so that's one example. And I'll also put a screenshot up of that and try to link that back so you can look at this source yourself. So understand that the picture isn't exactly clear cut when it comes to saying, A, this is a privately owned organization, and B, all the money that is poured into this is strictly coming from private ownership and private people, because that's not actually true. When you're giving hundreds of millions of dollars in incentives and perks and tax breaks on the taxpayer dollar. So as far as I'm concerned, the line becomes much more blurred at that point. We get into the other aspects of talking about this, and my first point of discussion is, okay, this may be legal and this may be all right for a private owner to do, of a business, of a corporation with their own private money, what have you. But when you're running an organization as big and as powerful and as influential as the Utah Jazz, is it really a good look for the organization? And I would say that that is a resounding no. And the reason being is what you are doing by putting this message out within the Utah Jazz organization, it is another tactic of division. No matter how you look at it, it is a tactic of division because you are excluding one class of children, and at this point, one class of children only, from this program, not based on the fact that they were poor students, meaning their grades were not good, not the fact that they are financially poor or come from bad neighborhoods. You're not basing it solely on these aspects. You're not basing it on the fact that they live in a world that encompasses all kinds of hardships and things that poor people across the spectrum deal with, okay? What I'm getting at is that being poor is not a universally black, it is not a universally Latino, it is not a universally Asian, and it's not even a universally white problem. This exists within every cortex of society, okay? So this is a universal human problem. This is not a problem that simply affects one demographic or every demographic in this case except one, all right? So the message that we're sending is that not only are we basing it supposedly on all of these other encompassing aspects, but you are also going to be disqualified and precluded from participating as a child. Now keep in mind, that's where I have a problem with this, is because it's with children. You're going to be precluded from participating simply because of the color of your skin. We're not disqualifying you because you're poor. We're not disqualifying you because maybe you have worse grades than these other kids. We're not disqualifying you because you come from this world where these other kids also come from. We're the only statistic we're looking at to disqualify you is simply you being born the wrong color. They have readily admitted in posts and interviews, and it's on the NBA.com website, that this is the reason white children are not included in this, is simply because of the color of their skin. They are disqualified, okay? Now, let's talk about a few other developments in this and break those down. Tucker Carlson, a couple of days ago, who's on the Fox network, for those of you that don't know, he did an interview with Spencer Cox, okay? Basically, and I'll put the text of that conversation, the screenshot of the text up here, and you will also hear a podcast that I'm going to refer to and play here on the video. You'll hear one of the women, even though she's in support of these scholarship programs, she's also going to say, with the caveat, okay, if this is supported by tax dollars, then maybe it's a different story. And I think she neglected to remember the fact that indeed the Utah Jazz have been supported by government and taxpayer money multiple times over the years. So in fact, the point of that she makes does, in a sense, apply to the Utah Jazz morally, if not legally. Spencer Cox basically, he gets in line with the Utah Jazz organization, says, A, this is okay, and I support it, and B, it's a private enterprise, they can do what they want with their money. A caveat that he also added to this at the end is he said, I do believe all children should be treated equally or with equality. So my question at that point becomes this to the governor. If you are removing the opportunity for white kids to qualify for this program simply based on their skin color, so it doesn't matter if they score 100%, they're an honor roll status student all the way through junior high and high school, and they excel at everything they've ever done in school, but yet they're poor as hell, it doesn't apply to them, apparently. But somehow he still believes in equality for all children. And to me, that is hypocritical as all hell. And I believe he's an intelligent individual and human being, and he knows that is hypocritical, period. You can't say, I support equality and equal treatment for all kids, and yet support something that disqualifies kids based on the color of their skin. Those two ideologies are polar opposites. We have a Salt Lake Tribune writer. He writes for the Utah Jazz, and his name is Eric Walden. And we had some verbal exchanges the last couple of days on his writings and his Twitter feed and his Twitter post. And I'm going to share some of the screenshots from that conversation throughout this part of the discussion. He also sends the same contradictory message as the governor. On one hand, he's supposedly about bringing kids up, believing in bringing kids up, equality, getting people all to a level where they have a chance to succeed. And yet on the other hand, as you'll see in some of his Twitter responses to me, he is okay with disqualifying white kids if that gives colored kids an opportunity instead for scholarships. The hypocrisy of these individuals and the arrogance is mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. As I confronted him throughout these conversations, he got to a point where he said, well, this is how white kids should feel. This is how white parents should feel. This is how this person should feel and that person. And I like to ask this excuse of a journalist, who the hell do you think you are to tell people how they should feel? They have every right to have how they feel heard, to have their own viewpoint, and have that viewpoint be different than you. I am so sick of seeing these people that are supposed to be unbiased journalists writing their own personal opinions and agenda pieces and calling that unbiased journalism. These guys don't even know what the meaning of journalism is anymore. It's an absolute joke. The governor of Utah ought to be ashamed of himself. This writer for the Utah Jazz and Salt Lake Tribune ought to be ashamed of himself. And people that support segregating our children based on color and taking away an opportunity from kids based on color ought to be ashamed of themselves. Period. End of story. End of story. You don't get to say you're against racism, you want to end racism, you want to end divisiveness, you want to have inclusion in this country. You don't get to say those things and then say, but here's the exceptions that benefit the classes we think should benefit. That's not how it works. That's what you call your own personal agenda. And it does not meet the definition of all inclusiveness, of non-divisiveness, and not being discriminatory and racist. Okay? Now, there was an interview that took place on the KUTV2 podcast. One of the speakers there was former House Speaker and lawmaker Greg Hughes. I think his take on the situation explains it simply. It explains it beautifully. I'd like to take a listen to that now and share with you what he had to say.
There's been a lot of talk over the last couple of days about Utah Jazz scholarships for every win. The owner, Ryan from Qualtrics, I've just lost his last name, Smith. In Utah, that's not hard to remember. I'm like, Ryan Smith. So he is giving away a scholarship to an underprivileged and student of color. There's, I think, 45 wins right now, so 45 scholarships. And there has been some concern because I don't even know who was meeting, but yesterday someone asked a question from an audience to the governor asking if he thought it was okay that a private business owner be choosing specifically not to let white children have these scholarships. And the governor said, it's okay. He said, it's a private business. Have at it. Give away scholarships and help kids. Mara, where do you stand on this one?
I'm with the governor on this one. It's private sector. It's private money. And, I think we could all always do better to articulate our reasoning and why we're doing what we're doing. But to enter into the fray of criticizing someone who's trying to add things into the community that are beyond themselves. Try to add conversations that say, hey, the world's not just about me, it's about a lot of other things, and trying to point out equity issues, albeit he's maybe not pointing it out in the way someone else would. Maybe he's not taking the same tact someone else would. But our community that feels free, particularly I should say our social media community, that feels free to just blast at everybody if things aren't said the exact right way they want them said or done the right way. So I'm going to applaud anyone from the private sector who wants to spend their wealth raising up our entire community and recognizing that there's inequity in where people are at their starting point. And if he can take someone's starting point and change it to a more advantageous one, I say private sector money should do that.
So, Greg, before we go to you, I want to actually read what Governor Cox said so I don't...
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording right there so that we can kind of keep things moving along, and each section that we get through, I can address it, and then we can just keep going. The things that this woman says all sound like they make sense on paper. They sound like they make sense on recording. The problem is that she's, again, making excuses why it is okay to discriminate against one color of skin to somehow lift up all of the other people of color by doing so, okay? So what they're trying to do, in essence, is say, hey, let's fix the problem of discrimination by discriminating against a certain color or shade. This is how we fix the problem, by doing more of the same behavior, okay? So let's go ahead and play some more here and let Greg explain, and I think he does a very nice job here articulating and explain why this idea doesn't work and why it's a failure. Take a listen.
David from Highland asked the question, if it's racist that Utah Jazz excludes white children from the team scholarship program, the governor's answer says it is not racist. Ryan Smith and the Jazz can do what they want with their funds. All kids should have equal opportunities, and we are proud of the Jazz. Your thoughts?
Okay, so real quick right there, you hear that the governor himself said it is not racist. All kids should have equal opportunities. Okay, if you're taking away that opportunity for this scholarship merely based on the fact that is the color and the skin shade color of somebody, then it is not equality and it is not an equal opportunity. What about that is so hard for these people to fucking articulate? They're hypocrites. The governor absolutely contradicted himself to the highest degree with this statement and this interview. He ought to be ashamed of himself. Let's continue.
So I'm glad you read the quote, because if it's inartfully said, then fair enough. I would agree with Mara that, maybe we could explain things a little bit better so that we understand what the governor was saying or what these scholarships are meant to do or who they are to serve. I will say this, that Title I kids, where those are children that live in the federal poverty level, their house income is in the federal poverty level. These are not children exclusively that are Black, that are exclusively Latino, that are exclusively Polynesian, or exclusively white. You have children growing up in circumstances, difficult circumstances, that are all race, color, creed, you name it. If their scholarship are for disadvantaged children who need a break and need help, and that is there are kids across this country that need help. Those are great scholarships, and I applaud the Utah Jazz for engaging, and they're having a lot of wins. So a great way to do it. But the question was asked that these scholarships have been described as for students of color. If these scholarships are only available for students of color, it's a disgrace, and I mean that word, because it would mean that you would go into that Title I school and you would segregate out and you would say, you're having a tough time, but you're white. You don't get the opportunity to have a scholarship. You would go into communities and poor communities in this country or in this state where there are poor white children, shoulder to shoulder with children of all ethnicity and color and race. And you'd say, okay, the white ones, you're not of color. The pigment of your skin does not qualify you for this scholarship. If that is truly what is happening here, then we better call it out. And if what I'm saying is no longer in this crazy world we're living in popular, then so be it. But children that are disadvantaged, regardless of color, had better be able to be helped by us, by all of us, our whole community, by our government, by our state, but by even the Utah Jazz. And if it's a white child that's in difficult circumstances, they should not be excluded because of that. It really does bother me the way I've read that. I hope it was said inaccurately, and it is not.
So I'm going to stop it again right there. He articulates the problem with this very simply, very quickly, and very well. How can you say that you are trying to lift all kids out of bad situations, be it poverty, be it living in bad circumstances, be it not access to quality education? How can you say that you're lifting all kids out of that situation and you're all for equality when you're basing this solely on the color of their skin? And that's exactly what's being done. It's exactly what is being done here. There's no denying it by any of them. They've all very clearly said that, yes, this is designed only for people of color. Whites, you are excluded. We don't care if you are a super student who's white and you grew up in the exact same neighborhood as these black children, as these Latino children. We don't care if you grew up with all the same gangs and crime around you, or you grew up without food and assistance the same way all these people did. None of that matters. We don't care about that. What we do care about is the pigment of your skin. So if you are white, don't bother applying for this. That's the message they're sending to the kids. And when Greg says that this is an absolute disgrace, if that is in fact what is happening, and I'm sad to tell him and notify him, I'm sure he's aware of it since the interview now, that yes, that is in fact what they are doing. It is in writing on the NBA.com website, and he says it is an absolute disgrace, and he is absolutely correct. It is an absolute disgrace that you would call this a program of equality for children. An absolute disgrace to the highest degree. How do you set an example for children who are the future of this country, mind you, that people seem to forget? How do you set that example and say, look, we want to raise you as a generation without racism, without segregating people by the color of their skin, to be all inclusive of people, to care about people and treat them with dignity and respect regardless of who they are, based on their sexual preference, based on their color, all the different categories. How do we tell our kids that's what we're expecting of them and that's what we're pushing them towards, and yet here we are awarding programs like this solely based on the skin tone first? It doesn't even work or comprehend together to be inclusive, as they're saying, or to have equality, or to bring everybody up. It doesn't even work. You look up the definitions of these words. It is an absolute polar opposite and a travesty and a disgrace that they're trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes and make them believe that this type of behavior is acceptable. The governor absolutely should be ashamed of himself. This writer who's trying to push this personal agenda on the public and calls himself a Utah Jazz writer for the Tribune is an absolute disgrace of a journalist. And I did say it, and I'll say it again. He's an absolute disgrace as a writer. That he would say with his reporting that not only is he okay with dividing and segregating and not including white kids on this, but that is somehow equal to equality. You have your mind really screwed up on what the definition of those terms and words mean, my man. And yes, I am talking to you, Eric, of the Salt Lake Tribune. Looking at the social media numbers of him and the paper itself, we can see how important that they are in this day and age. They don't hold a very high reputation or are very reputable in today's world. We'll just say it like that and leave it like that. Do I think that the owners of the Utah Jazz, Ryan Smith and his wife, probably had the best interest in mind when they initially set this up? I would like to hope so. Was it their idea to segregate the children by color? I don't know. Only they can answer that. They can give the public that information if they choose to or not choose to. And it could have been further down the line on this program with other people involved that it diluted to that. But I would like to hope that wasn't their intention. But clearly, that is what this has devolved into. And they moved forward with this program far enough that I do have to say I'm extremely, extremely disappointed in the decision of the new owners and the direction that they took this. In all the years that the Millers were the owners of the Jazz and the basketball program here, You never saw them set up programs like Junior Jazz or any of these other scholarships or programs that they had before and during games. You never saw any of those programs be inclusive of one particular demographic and non-inclusive of another based on skin. You never saw that. And here we are with the new owner just a short time in, and he thinks that by not including white people that somehow he's making the programs that are available and the things being done more inclusive. I mean, it's an absolute hypocrisy of the very definition of these things. I would hope that at the end of this season, they make some major adjustments and open this program up to all children. If we're going to send the message of equality, inclusiveness, not being racist, not being divisive, if we're going to send that message to kids and expect them to believe in it and believe in us as adults, then we need to lead by example. And by saying that kids cannot participate in this because of the color of their skin, that isn't leading by example. The only thing that's doing is repeating the cycle that we've already seen before and creating more division, more animosity between people, and less inclusion and less of bringing people together. And you know, that really, as on a human level, an adult level, that really hurts my heart for the kids especially. That right here is what's important to me, is not making these kids feel this difference. A white kid, a black kid, an Asian child, a Latino child, they should not ever have to feel that their worth or their self-value is based on the color of their skin. But here in this particular program and message, that's exactly what the adults and the Jazz are sending as a message. They're saying we are going to put the color of your skin first. Doesn't matter how good of a student you are, doesn't matter your circumstances, doesn't matter if you might have the worst circumstances out of every kid that applies in the state of Utah, you're automatically disqualified because you're white. It's a shame that this is where they decided to take their program and pander towards being politically correct. It's a shame that we have people that are supposedly journalist experts, excuses for writers like this Eric. It's a shame that we have them in positions where they can write up this nonsense and somehow get readers to buy into it and believe it. And, you know, it's, in my opinion, the governor, the writer, and the Utah Jazz, part of the organization that thought this was a good idea, you all ought to be absolutely ashamed of yourselves. It's pathetic, honestly. Absolutely pathetic what you've done. To tell you the truth, as being a lifelong Utah Jazz fan, I'm going to continue to support the players because I don't believe that there's a single player on our team that would go out of his way to give away a pair of his shoes or a basketball or some other piece of memorabilia that's autographed by him. I don't think there's a single player on the team that would say, I'm going to provide this to only colored kids, or I'm going to provide this only to white kids or only Hispanic kids. I believe every one of them will pick up that pair of shoes, pick up that basketball, and if they see a kid there, their eyes light up to receive something from them as a player. That might be their sports idol or their idol to make it in the future. It isn't going to matter what color that kid is. They're going to, as players, give that to them, and the players are going to be extremely excited about that, and the children, not only that, but their parents are going to be extremely excited about that. So I'm going to continue to support the Utah Jazz as a lifelong fan like I have, but I will not, until this program is changed, support the Utah Jazz as ownership, an organization, or purchasing tickets or merchandise until this policy is changed. So that means as much as I wanted to attend a playoff game this year, I will not be attending, because let's face the truth here. The Jazz are going to have to save face this year, so they're not going to change the policy this year. I expect that some kind of change will happen in the off season when this whole thing has died down and it's more quiet. But for right now, they have the backing of the NBA with all the other nonsense that's been going on with politics involved in sports, and they are not going to admit they were wrong, and they're going to save face, and so they won't be changing it this year. I'm almost certain of that. I'm positive of that. So in the meantime, I'm going to not spend a dime with the Utah Jazz, and if I can find free places, so quote unquote, to watch the games, then so be it. That's what I'll be doing. And however that happens, that'll happen. As long as I'm not putting revenue in the pockets of the Jazz organization until this changes, I'm all for it. I'm going to continue to support the players because we have a good group of guys here. They deserve to be recognized for the hustle and effort and working their asses off this year without having this whole thing blow up in their face and have people walk away from them. So that's how I'm going to continue to try to support them without financially supporting the organization. I'm just going to close with this. I received a Twitter message from one of the people I was having this back and forth with last night. Goes by the name of Jazz Fans Against Racism. So this is what he sent to me. It's not a perfect metaphor, but it's useful to think about the difference between equity and equality. Equity seeks to meet everyone's particular needs, whereas equality would just give everyone the same thing. And he's hashtagged it, take note. I don't know if that's a quote directly from the Jazz that he's pulled or that's something that he came up with himself. At any rate, it is something he and I can agree on is a perfect, he says it's not a perfect, but I think it's a great metaphor for the situation, but not for the same reason he believes it is. You know, when you look at the difference, and he explains this very well here, equity seeks to meet everyone's particular needs, which is exactly what these people are trying to do by providing a scholarship for only people of color. You're trying to right a sideways ship, so to speak, by doing other unbalanced activities and promotions to people. So what I'm saying with that is that because we have these problems with inequality in this country and discrimination, which can go any direction from anybody, because we have these problems, let's go ahead and do this unbalanced and hypocritical activity and give away a scholarship to only people of color. We're going to believe that that means equality, when actually, whereas equality, even according to him, gives everyone the same thing. And this comes down to being that simple. If you provide the opportunity for every child, regardless of their skin color, that are in these particular circumstances or situations, then you are meeting the definition of equality, because you're giving them all the same opportunity and not being biased or discriminatory because of their skin shade. So actually, he proved my point very, very simply, quickly, and beautifully. And it's sad that people can't understand the definitions of the words racist, racism, divisiveness, inequality, and equity, and understand the difference as to what they actually mean. Look up the true definitions, not your perceived perception of what they mean. Look these words up in Webster's dictionary and actually look up what they mean and what they were designed for, okay? He admits it right there in his own metaphor that he sent to me. Equality would just give everyone the same thing. Funny, isn't it? Give all kids, regardless of their skin shade, the opportunity to qualify for this. Sounds like a good idea to me. See you on the next show, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. Let me know what you think in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video. If you thought enough of the video, then go ahead and head over to Patreon. I just barely got my Patreon channel up, and I would appreciate any support there that you can give. Until the next time, the next topic of discussion, everybody be safe, be blessed, and I will catch you on the flip side. Peace. If you are interested in becoming an advertiser to the Lunchbox Show or want to become a sponsor, reach out to us via email or head over to our Patreon account.
Range from politics to the arts, latest on sports, and #1 on the music charts, all covered here. So grab yourself a beer and get yourself comfortable and lend us your ear. You see, every show different, but every show be on point. We have legit variety, so when